How you doing?
Oh, not bad. Doing all right. So let's I don't know. Let's talk a little bit about the PMR. Yeah. Let's see. What do I have? I don't know. PMR is really cool speech. I think it's the most fun speech in debate. One of the hardest things about the PMR is that it really changes. I think probably more than any other speech. I think it's probably the most dynamic speech in parley, and perhaps the most dynamic speech in any form of debate, because you have to have, I mean, you're kind of doing some of the same things a lot, but that looks incredibly different on different topics. It can be all about the single procedural that they go for, one that you go for. It can be a bunch of comparison between different cases. Some PMRs should only be a couple minutes long. It's, anyway, a very dynamic speech. So I think kind of one of the big things that I want to talk about today is what you should be trying to do in the PMR, and the goals that you should be setting yourself and the things that you should be trying to accomplish. And I think kind of the reason that I want to talk about that is because I think I see a lot of people give PMRs where I think it can be said that people are not attempting a winning PMR. And by that I don't mean that they've picked even the wrong strategy or that they aren't making the arguments that are necessary for them. But I think people, many people in the beginner, even to intermediate to good debaters, who are people who are short of the best PMRs, and sometimes even the very best PMRs in the country, are not even asking themselves to do the things that are necessary to win. So I think we're going to talk a little bit today about what you need to do to win in the PMR and what you should be, what your goals should be. All right, actually, yeah, before we look at that slide. So in terms of the broad purpose of the PMR, I'd like to hear from you all what you think the PMR should be seeking to do. What is the purpose of the PMR as a speech?
First, address anything new out of the block.
That's definitely an element, and definitely also, I don't know, I'm seeking a little bit broad strokes too, in terms of very generally speaking, what is it a speech that the central goal is to accomplish? Yeah.
Explain why the affirmative wins.
Explain why the affirmative wins. Sure. I think that's it's very much at the core of the PMR.
Comparing the app world, like post whatever, versus the next world on like a big level.
Mm-hmm. Comparisons, competing worlds. These are all very much on the right track. Yeah, definitely. So, I think, the purpose of the PMR is, I think, kind of obvious and yet somewhat elusive. I think there are lots of answers that get a part of it. It makes the debate clear, doesn't impact Cal, beats the block, etc. Although I think really the central question of the PMR is perhaps a reframing of the who won the debate question, because I think that's sort of almost a truism. The who has more offense question is, I think, the central question of the PMR. I think that, I don't know, my philosophy on debate is that debate is a game of impacts, and everything that you do in every speech in debate should be in service of generating comparatively more impacts to your side, whether that's attempting to deny an impact by the other team or establish an impact to your own side. Everything should be governed by impacts, or perhaps there's some space to do things that are governed by jokes, but mostly impacts, like maybe 10% jokes, but only when you're really far ahead on the impact stuff. So I think that the question is who has more offense. Everything you do in the PMR should be in explaining in terms of why you have more offense than they do. There's a bunch of different ways to do that. So does everyone feel pretty comfortable about offense and defense? Someone just explain to me very quickly what offense and defense are, and we can skip the slide, but I'll leave it in the PowerPoint if anyone's not feeling bold right now, but would like a bit of a refresher later. Yeah. So Justin, right?
Justin, yes.
Okay, great.
So the defensive argument, they say econ's bad. You say, no, it's not.
Yeah.
They say econ's, and then an offensive argument would say econ's bad, but they'll turn offensive, or econ is good, and these are the reasons why. And because of that, because of the economy being good, here are the reasons that good things happen.
Yeah. Anybody?
I guess I maybe understand it as, like, instead of saying econ good, being like econ bad is a good thing. Like.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I think those are probably the link offense and the impact offense. You say we make the economy good. Well, other offenses, no, it's good now. You make it worse. Is the link offense, the impact offense is yeah, you make it good, and that's awful because environment or something. I don't know, whatever. But very, very broadly, I would frame offense in terms of establishing impacts on your side, reasons why your advocacy, be that the plan, the status quo, the counter plan, the alternative, whatever, why that is creating, something comparatively good, or why, the strategy of the other side is comparatively worse. The other side, and defense is trying to limit impacts from the other side. But we don't need to talk about that too much. So, I have, and I wonder, apparently VSilk, I was once Facebook chatting VSilk, which this is not something I terribly remember, and I told him that there were like kind of 8 steps in a PMR. I'd be curious to know if these are the same 8 steps that you got told, because I don't remember that conversation, but I bet they're similar.
They're similar.
Yeah, if not exactly the same. So interesting. But so I think PMRs look really different round to round, and the important thing about the reason why I think it's really important to think about all these different steps is so that round to round you continue to give PMRs that establish the same task, even as the specifics of these tasks start looking dramatically different. Whether you're answering a block that was 12 minutes of topicality, or going for case is a disadd to the alternative against a critique. But keep in mind kind of these core things that you're doing. So all of these are kind of in the service of answering the who has more offense question. You want to consistently accomplish these things. And this is not, this is not like strict doctrine. It's not like memorize this. I mean, obviously, even if I were saying it was strict doctrine, who would give a shit? Who am I? But anyway, I think that it's sort of, think about the ways in which you need to kind of address these big general things. It doesn't have to be in this order, although this is probably the order that I liked to do it in, that I think I coach people to do it in. I think it's a good order. It doesn't have to be these exact steps, but it's all about getting the same point. So the first part of PMR is selecting the offense that you want to go for. Look at me, I accidentally a word. Offense. You want to go for. So obviously that means selecting a single selecting either a single position or a combination of positions that make up a component part of your offense. When I keep going back to the PMR can look very different, because that could be the offense that I'm going to be going for is just my case, and I'm going to say that out of ways. Or the offense could be an impact turn to a disadd, or the offense could be the permutation with a net benefit to the critique. There could be any number of things that you're going for. The second argument is the second thing you'll be doing is extending the necessary component pieces of that offense. So you'll be thinking to yourself, what are the arguments that I need to win to be able to get the offense I'm going for? Then I think you should be asking yourself, and we're going to go through each of these steps, asking yourself what threatens your access to that offense, how can people stop me from getting the offense I want, and then that's kind of the big first part of your PMR. After that, you need to look for the offense that might beat you, the offense you're extending the arguments that stop them from getting there, addressing your opponent's extensions, and then I think there's a macro level comparison is kind of the last level step, the last step. A lot of people I think seem to count on in PMRs, in MOs, just like, oh, obviously I'm winning all arguments, right? Very rarely the way that it's actually going to go. The way that it's usually going to go is they're going to have some offense and you're going to have some offense, so you need some very detailed explanation about why your offense is more and or better. So, picking your offense. I think the only solid criterion for picking an argument to go for in the PMR is that when combined with the rest of the speech, can it be the most important argument of the round, or can it get you the most offense? I think there's probably 2 steps in looking at this question of selecting your offense. The first is, what can I win? And I think that's the work that a lot of people are pretty good at doing, who have been in debate, for a little bit, who have, been to a camp or two, who have been, have maybe at least a year under their belt, or even often less. I think the other question is, can I make winning this argument sufficient? So let's talk about first, what can I win? So it's what offense do I have the necessary component parts for which I can answer my opponent's arguments. What arguments do I have the necessary component parts for? So I think that the easiest way for us to start making PMR decisions is to look at what people didn't answer as much, right? That's the most baseline, obvious criteria. It's oh, advantage 1 is dropped. That's probably part of my PMR strategy. They only said 3 arguments they only said 3 arguments to the impact terms. These are probably things that indicate to you should be able to go for. I think that, obviously, that's not sufficient. Some arguments are very difficult to answer, right? Like, let's say, for example, you're reading, or actually, here's the example. It's written on the PowerPoint, Joe. You don't need to come up with an example. If you plan on going for MG theory, and they make an argument that says reject the argument, not the team, right? Which is to say, do not vote against us on theory, just don't give us access to the counter plan. Then they kick the counter plan and they go for a different strategy. That becomes, even if it's just one argument, it becomes very difficult to overwhelm. You basically would need to, reestablish reasons, if it's not in the original shell, why you would have to reject them just for reading the counter plan. Those arguments probably mostly sound like condo bad, right? Because it's, well, the abuse has already happened, but that kind of requires a whole another extrapolation of theory. It's something like you can't consult people. There probably is no reason independent to that shell why they should lose just for reading the theory argument. So it becomes a big deal. The other thing is that your argument may have flaws in it that stops you, that constrains you from going for it, even if the argument is theoretically a good one and it is an argument you're mostly winning. So if there's not a voter on MG theory, as we continue to talk about MG theory, I just don't know how you're going to be able to overcome that, right? Or if you don't have a clear link to the disadvantage to the counterpoint. So all of these things constrain you just from going oh, this has 3 answers, which is less than the 7 answers on this piece. This is the piece I like. The other constraint is probably the one that's going to come into play. I don't know. They both matter. The second constraint, though, is I think one that's very difficult for people to navigate, which is that this path of least resistance, this easiest thing to win, isn't always going to be your best bet. So if they are kind of swinging for the fences with a big China relations disad, and you've got a very small app about helping, about alleviating some type of structural violence in kind of a specific region or city in the United States, it can be very difficult for you, even if you win that argument, to win the entire debate, right? There are ways to do that, obviously, like impact prioritization arguments, probability first, if you have some sick defense to the disad, all of those things would enable you to go for that tiny advantage, but you have to ask yourself if it's there, if you have the help from your MG and the rest of the speech to make it matter. If not, what you need to do is, grit your teeth and try to sort out the relations debate and go for your big stick advantage, assuming you have one, or if not, go for something that will kind of bring you into power parity, I suppose, with the disadvantage. And this gets me to an idea that's not, I don't think, on a specific slide, but I think it's very important for people to realize in the PMR, and it's coaching that I keep finding I give whenever I coach at camps or whenever I work with the folks at Whitman, is that you need to don't be Mitt Romney in the PMR. Mitt Romney, I think, ran a campaign in 2012, and the premise of that campaign was I really don't want to make a mistake. It's I know I'm losing, and I'm going to probably keep losing, but I don't want to make the city worse, so I'm just going to kind of sit here and hope Obama just fucks up really bad. Not an effective strategy in the PMR. You need to actually go, and I'm not, never mind, I'm not going to explain that analogy. That analogy's fine. In the PMR, you need to not just go for the thing that is going to kind of look the best. There's ways to kind of lose prettier, and if you've seen enough debate, if you've seen a bunch of debates, you know what this looks like, right? It's they did kind of a good job extending the defense to the disad, and the offense is close on the advantage outweighing, but they don't win. And it's what you're going to do is you're going to lose by a little bit, 100% of the time with some strategies. If you want to win debates, you need to take the strategy that has a 20% shot of winning or whatever, and just go for it, even if it's gonna take 30 seconds maybe for people to decide that you're just wrong about it. So don't try to lose by a little. Do the thing that actually has a chance of actually having more offense. So what makes offense sufficient is a little bit of work here. So let's just talk about different things that make offense that makes an argument sufficient to beat the rest of the strategy. The first is, let's talk about the example of MG theory. What does that require? Not another damn thing. If you actually win it and it's an a priori voting issue, congrats, you've won the debate. We talked a little bit about an example like this, but say you have an advantage of solving kind of a small and proximal refugee crisis versus a disadvantage that has an econ collapse impact that goes to extinction. Well, you probably want probability first impacts calc with some probability mitigation to the disad, or terminal defense to the disad, even if you don't do impacts calc, that would be sufficient. Or some argument that says the advantage controls the internal link to the dissent, that perhaps the refugee crisis over the long run will destroy the American economy, which is going to create all of your impacts, so it's try or die for the affirmative to be able to resolve the issue, right? These are all ways which you can make the offense bigger. Impact turns to decay, if you want to go for that. First thing you would want to do to make the impact turns to decay enough for you to win on is, if you're just going for the impact turns and not case as an impact turn, make sure you're not accidentally conceding some offense to your own case, right? Because then that would mean that even if the critique is wrong, perhaps the SQO is a better option. Always be careful, always clean up. Some defense to the impacts. Alt cause claims, sorry, that's a bit of a tongue twister. The K is not a root cause claims. You would need some reason why, even if the critique causes, aside from the fact that the critique causes independent bad things, that it does not solve worse things, or that those things are not inevitable in a world absent the alternative. Then you would probably need some disruption to alt solvency, right? But you should be thinking about this. So, okay, if this is what I want to be my offense, what other arguments do I need to limit the offense of the negative team sufficiently to make that offense the biggest in the round? That's, I think, kind of the big question. So let's talk about extending the component pieces of an argument, which is one of the steps. Who knows which number? Maybe people with notes, maybe not them. Who knows? Unimportant. Extending the component pieces. So what are actually? Let's go first before you all read it, even though you may have already read it. Many of you already know it anyways. What are the necessary component parts of extending an argument? What all do you have to do to extend an argument? Identify it. That is the first step. Excellent. Don't just go extend the really good argument. People will not know what argument that is unless it's just like that good, in which case, bravo for you. What comes after identifying an argument and extending it? Good. That's definitely, and I don't think order probably matters. That wasn't what I had next, but sure. Impact to the argument. And let's be clear on impact. I know I already have been saying impacts. Debate is a game of impacts, but all arguments have impacts, right? Link arguments have an impact to them. That impact being they demonstrate that the plan causes something, right? A uniqueness argument has an impact to it. If it's if it's an advantage uniqueness argument, the impact to the uniqueness on the debate round is that there is something bad that is happening inevitably in the status quo. So we've got identify the argument, impact the argument, and probably one other thing. It's part of kind of the structure of all arguments. All arguments should have one. A warrant, yeah. I think you probably need a warrant for your extension. So, what you'll actually see a lot of, and I think people really know this, but they need to keep it in mind more. Because what you'll see a lot of if you watch debaters in either the MO or the PMR, which in some ways are analogous speeches, in some way aren't, whatever, you'll see a lot of extend the fourth link argument. You've completely dropped this, which is going to be really bad for you. You know that it's true now, right? And I don't think that's like a parody. I think it sounds a lot like that a lot of times. That is not anything. I mean, I don't know, like perhaps a judge, I don't know, it would be annoying if no one pointed out the lack of these arguments in the anyway. Perhaps that's enough for you. Perhaps a judge will draw an arrow next to it, and then they'll do all that work for you. But that is not an extension of an argument. That's just a claim. That's just a reference to a number and an assertion that that number matters, right? You need to identify the specific argument, explain the reason why the argument is true, and explain the importance of that argument in the debate. I think Martin said in the LOR lecture, if any of you were in that, which was very good, is that sometimes in the LOR, you're kind of explaining how debate functions to people. And you shouldn't be doing it in a patronizing way. Most people in our judging pool have a good idea of how debate functions, but I still think that, at least for me as a judge, like telling me how to interpret different arguments and explaining their utility allows me to much more easily give them full weight and deploy them fully for you. So you should be explaining, explaining how you win, which is one of our initial answers for what the PMR does. You should be explaining what arguments do and how they function. Cool. So yeah, identify the argument, extend it, extend a warrant, and impact your winning of that argument. So, this is an example. I pulled up some random Whitman file. Extend the third argument. It was for the South Sudan topic in the NPT. Extend the third uniqueness argument. It proves that the South Sudan rebels won't come to the table because their conditions haven't been met. This guarantees uniqueness on the advantage because even if you believe all of the negative claims about there being no violence in the status quo, tensions will necessarily escalate if the rebels continue to operate without peace talks. That means that the conflict is going to happen in the status quo, only a question of whether or not the affirmative can resolve it. Go to the what component parts do you need? There's always certain things that you, and it's, I don't know, it varies somewhat around, but generally you always need to win the same types of arguments. Advantage, you need your impact uniqueness, your link uniqueness, one link, and one impact. That's it. I think people are trying to extend way too much of positions in order to win them. This is also true for all of you in the MOs. I think a lot of this speech could kind of, or a lot of this lecture, pardon me, could kind of be applied to the MO as well. Although, what do I know? I didn't give that speech. But, so that means that you need a reason, something bad's going to happen, the fact that the plan has not been attempted yet, and just one argument that says plan is able to resolve the problem, and one impact, right? As long as you've got those component parts, you are solving an advantage. That's all you need to come out of. So that means picking the specific uniqueness arguments you like, and picking the specific link arguments you like. Oh no, it's the perception argument, or oh no, it's that this will create pressure on the rebels to come to the table. It won't, even if it doesn't solve the conflict directly, right? Pick your specific arguments. For MG theory, it would be, you would need an interpretation, a violation, one or more, but at least one standard, an impact, and a voter. And then perhaps like competing interpretations, and perhaps a rejected team argument, right? But be thinking about these. Be thinking about these as you're going for arguments. And a lot of them, you'll use the same arguments over and over again, so you won't have to think very hard to think about what are all the claims that I need to win to make this the offense that I want it to be. Otherwise, you're just going to leave shit on the table. For impact turns, I think it's probably links to the turn and impacts to the turn. I don't know, am I forgetting something? I think that's probably all you need to extend in order to win an impact turn. You'll need to win other arguments to make that impact turn sufficient, but that's probably it. So there's some examples. So the next step is address arguments that threaten your offense, right? The PMR is a much more line-by-line dependent speech than people think it is. It's really not, and I was really not, I'm not going to even say probably, I certainly was guilty of not kind of respecting this enough and doing too much kind of broad analysis, but it's a speech where you really need to be very good on the line-by-line debate, because you're responsible for answering 12 minutes of block arguments, and you can't sort of do that just by discussing everything and sweeping generalizations. So every block argument has to have a solution to it. Every argument they can block, all 12 minutes of it, and that's very daunting. But they do a lot of people, I don't know, make a lot of bad arguments that don't matter. Don't worry, it's doable. So there are, I think, kind of two main ways to address an argument. And this is I like this explanation a lot conceptually, so hopefully it's helpful to you. You can either go through an argument or go around an argument, right? The idea of going through an argument is just you are wrong, right? Like, let's say we're going for, I don't know, some global warming advantage, and they're like, global warming's not real, so that's defense to this advantage. You just, no. This is wrong, global warming is real, here's a bunch of data about the temperatures rising, here's a bunch of data about how many scientists agree, etc., right? Just run that shit over. The other way to deal with an argument is to, I think, go around the argument. And this is what I think really good PMRs, well, good PMRs are good at just answering stuff too, but I think good PMRs are really good at just explaining why arguments don't matter. I'm trying to, let me see if I can think of an example of that. So perhaps it's something like they say you can't solve global warming because you can't solve for China. Perhaps going around that argument consists of we don't need to solve China. We don't need to solve China now because we create a market that solves green tech that solves China eventually. Or we don't need to solve China now because we're going to go for our particulate matter impact, which says we solve tens of thousands of deaths even if we don't solve warming. Or that's sufficient to give examples. But I think the thing that you kind of can't do, that people do, is like gently bumping up against an argument and then kind of hoping people forget about it afterwards, or ignoring an argument, right? But any claim that's made that says, no, you're wrong about your case, or no, you don't get this advantage, demands a response. You can't just sort of be like, they say this, but, well, it's like partial defense, so whatever, and then like go back to your speech. That's not going to be effective. That's how you lose debates, especially because you've now called attention to it and called attention to the fact that you don't have an answer to it. Not to say that just ignoring it and being like, maybe everyone will forget that the MO makes this argument. That's not a particularly good strategy. Here's some examples. Damn it. So in terms of answering threats to your offense, we've got our advantage that says we increase forces in the South China Sea, which deters Chinese aggression. They say the increase is too small to deter China. Going around. Doesn't matter if you can see it's only a question of credibility. China will never mess with us if they know we care. Or doesn't matter, it's sufficient to calm down Japan, which means Japan won't proliferate. We're going for that impact. We're not going for the China scenario. Or going through the arguments. No, you don't set a threshold for what would be sufficiently big or small. Defer to our evidence on how these limit the way in which China could operate in the region means that it would be able to deter them from being aggressive. Or no, we may not be a bunch of money or ships, but we're qualitatively big as per this warrant about how we have magic technology that's sufficient for some reason, right? So there's some examples of this. Okay. Yeah. Alex.
That's where the MO has a lot of unique, how would you suggest
Yeah, I think that when the MO's doing a bunch of new stuff, there's probably a few different ways you should handle it. The first thing you should do is always question whether some of it is bad for them. And I think that's often a thing that happens in EMO. So certainly a new impact, right? You're obviously impact turning, but I'm sure you know that. But even, I don't know, I guess this is, whatever. I'll break the war story taboo because it's about me losing, so I'm not being an ass, and also I think it's a helpful scenario. So we once were debating, I was once debating, and my partner and I were negative on some topic, and we basically read, never mind. I don't remember the story well enough that it's not going to just take a bunch of time. So the first thing I would begin with is think about ways in which their own arguments might be hurting them. The second thing that you should be doing is look really for ways to kind of just not deal with the new offense they're reading, right? If they just want to read like a bunch of new case defense, perhaps there's a strategy that you go for that doesn't depend on that advantage, right? Because that gives you a very simple time. In a world where you have to go through it, I think it's a lot kind of like sorting through anything else. There's not really a special way to do it. Although I would probably begin before I go into the line by line of that argument. I would kind of begin with brief. Before we go to the line by line of this position. You should give me, you should give me more leeway on the new MO answers because there's no backside rebuttals. Because there's no backside rebuttals in Parley. This is unfair because they have a 12-minute block. Also, this encourages sandbagging and people just like hiding their actual arguments until they get to the block. And I think people will let you get away with a lot more if you do that. So now, if we want to discuss denying opponent's offense, I think the whole process is very similar to extending yours, right? It should be easy to identify because you should be paying freaking attention during the MO, and your partner should at least be listening for you in the LOR. But if you're debating someone who's doing it right at all, they're clearly going for a very specific piece of offense, and they're going for it for a really long time, and they're talking about how it's a big deal. So it shouldn't be terribly difficult to identify where they're looking to leverage offense. I think then at that point you start looking through your arguments to answer that offense and ask yourself which kind of defensive arguments you want to go for. I think one of the questions is how easily can I extend this argument, which is usually dependent on the strength of the MO answers. Something's dropped, you can very easily extend it. And how effective is the argument at denying an impact? And I think that the second thing is something people need to start doing a lot more in the PMR when they're extending defense. Because I think people are just like, it's a dropped argument. It's a dropped argument, and I labeled it as a no link, so there's not a link anymore. Not necessarily going to be effective for you. So let's talk about maybe a situation where you're going for, unless there's there's not an example on the next slide. Okay, let's talk about a situation where the other team is going for a business confidence position, right? And you've got this link argument which says, turn, we lead to this awesome technology that businesses like in the long run. But the MO scenario is the MO is going for this perception link, right? Which is that in the world of plan, you're doing a carbon tax or something on the F. The MO is all in a world of plan, it looks like Obama hates businesses and they're not going to protect businesses and they care more about the environment than the economy, which means that businesses will be afraid about future regulations. It's not a question of whether or not there's costs from this specific law. Makes sense as an MO strategy? So how good is your link turn at answering that argument? Not very good. You can perhaps turn it into that argument and say, no, businesses will correctly perceive that this saves them costs, and businesses will perceive that this is a savvy move by the Obama administration that allows them to develop a new market. You're probably wrong about that, and you probably need to be going for something else, right? So ask yourself, what is actually true about the disad that limits the disad offense in a world where it's true before you extend it? Then you need to extend the argument completely, just like you would the offensive arguments we talked about. Identify it, extend it, warrant it, and impact it. So I think we're good to talk about some impact calc. We sort of assume that at this point we have moved past our we've extended our offense, we've dispatched our opponent's feeble attempts to indict our awesome plan. We'll do a little bit of impact calc now. Always do some of it is my highly advanced PMR analysis for you. You may laugh, as well you might, but people don't always do it, and they always should do it. I think that, that's enough. That's enough. Like, you should be comparing the impacts of that versus the impacts of the negative and explaining why they're bigger. It can be anywhere in a speech, and just after, it can be after your overview, it can be part of your overview, it can be after you in offense, it can be at the very bottom of everything. Generally, the place that I like to stick it was right after I extended my offense, because it's like, oh, now that I've told you about my offense, let me tell you how good it is in comparison to their offense. I think that made a lot of conceptual sense. And here's just a side note, like last year, it was great coaching Martin, because Martin thought about debate stuff a lot, as I think you could tell from the lecture he gave on practice, if any of you went to that. And we would have arguments about really trivial shit like this. We would have arguments about we would agree on what impact to go for and what arguments to get there and how to do the impact calculus. We would have arguments about where you should do the impact calculus in the speech. And I thought that was just reflective of him being an awesome debater and a really great person to coach, because he's always thinking about those things. And it's not really so much a question of, hey, get in a bunch of arguments with your coach about where to do impact calculus, but it's always be thinking about how can I make things a little bit better. Where do I like putting this specific argument? How do I like framing this specific argument? And develop opinions about what you think is good and challenge them in conversations with other people. And that's much more of just a very, very broad debate thing than it is a PMR thing, but I think it's worth noting. There are 3 steps to impact calculus. The first is you kind of identify a reason to prefer your impact. Let's say, for example, it's probability. The next step, often skipped, is that warrant that you are actually better at that thing, right? A lot of people will do, and I was sometimes guilty of this, you should always prefer the most probable impacts, which is us, I assume. But you need to actually give a reason that you are the more probable impact or that you are the bigger impact. People are pretty good at that, though. This next thing, people are pretty bad at, which is warranting why that thing comes first. You need an impact to your impact calculus, if that makes sense. You can't just say, you should vote for us on probability, we're more probable for these reasons. Well, there's a bunch of other things to look at, right? This also gets to something about, I think a good model of impact calculus, but one that is best, one that people should try to outgrow as they become more advanced. I hope that doesn't sound super condescending, but I do think it's a model you should try to outgrow. Is you should prefer us for 3 reasons. The first is probability. We're more probable because. The second is magnitude. We're more magnitudinal because. The third is time frame. We're time framier because. That's not a very good example of impact calculus, because it sort of is assuming that you want to do it. You assume that you're doing all these things in every round. Are you actually going to win all of those in every round? And in a world where, say, you're winning 1 of the 3 or 2 of the 3, how does that help the judge decide which of those things is comparatively more important? I think that sometimes you should be doing a couple, maybe you're even doing impact calc on 3 different reasons to prefer your type of impact. But generally, I think you should be selecting a single reason and saying, this is the best reason because. And if you think about the different types of strategies that go against one another, it's often very likely that you're only going to have one of them, right? If you've got a small af, you're probably going to be able to solve something that's kind of bad, but it may not be as big as the big stick disats. Or, that makes sense. So you're often going to be having a single area or a couple areas of strengths. You need to make those bigger. What was your question, Justin?
Would it be strategic to admit that they may be winning 1 of the 3?
Sure.
And then be like, but because of these other reasons, will we pull the ballot?
Yeah. I think that congratulations, your nonsense disad has a big impact. Doesn't matter, you're voting for the impact that will actually happen for these reasons, I think is a very good thing to do. And you can always frame things as in even if scenarios, right? It's like, ours is bigger, but even if it's not, it doesn't matter. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the big three impact filters. I don't want to go too long on this specific thing. You got magnitude for the biggest impact. I think that people won't admit this, but I think the judges often default to magnitude. So I think that you should be, be aware of that. Like if you've got a smaller impact and they've got some defense and you've got some defense, but you've probably got more defense, and like that's where the round is at the end, I think you're losing in front of most judges, with absence of impact calculus. So the reason you would go for magnitude is it allows you to go for infinite risk calculus. It's like, we solve this advantage that we don't really solve, but if we don't solve it, no one will, and it's big. So it allows you to get out of a lot of defense. Justifications for that would be, we have to avoid catastrophe. There's the idea of infinite risk calculus, right? Like a 0.000% chance of a infinitely bad impact adds to infinity. Have fun with probability that probably is not mathematically sound at all. The idea that it filters discussions to the most important outcomes is a warrant you could read. Talk about probability. This was my jam. Prefer the most likely impacts. It allows you to kind of pick a small case. It allows you to move silly impact scenarios, and it privileges smart, true defense. This is why I liked it. I always liked going for probability because I had the pleasure of debating with super awesome MG, who was always reading really good defensive arguments, and it allowed me to leverage those arguments and make them more important by introducing probability as the biggest controlling question. I think the justifications for probability are really fun to go for. You could say that it's more educational to discuss likely outcomes. It avoids race to the bottom and generic stuff. Magnitude only leads to bad decisions. Like, you would never get in a car if you evaluated things on magnitude because you're like, but I could die. Well, yeah, you could always die. Like, you gotta go places, man. And I think there's also some good sort of critical stuff about how the magnitude first, disregard probability is the way that in which the conservative forces always stop us from achieving real change, and that's bad. I think that if you kind of read a solid block of this, people almost always love it. It's also I'm not a speaker points guy, but I assume it's usually worth a few speaker points because people just love that type of analysis. Timeframes, fun and interesting. Prefer what happens soonest. It takes out, just people can just say ridiculous stuff that happens a long way in the future. Just having some leverage against that is good. It's also, I think timeframes are really good impact filter to go for if you're kind of losing. I think that I tended to find that if I was going for time frame, it was usually in a debate where everything didn't work for me. But it is a thing. Plan usually happens immediately. It is often a way, and then if all of a sudden you can make that important, do this. So justifications for that is I think it's real world. There's moral imperative to act. Let another policy maker solve the problem later. And this is the argument I really like: is the time frame is the internal link to probability. The idea is that you can only kind of assess what is likely to happen in the near term. As you start making predictions that are further out, there can be more problems that are introduced or more solutions that are introduced, and we don't know exactly how that's all going to break down. My favorite example of this was I was watching, when I first came into debate, and I was watching videos to learn how it worked. It was 2008, and so I was watching something from That Nationals, and it was in or That Nationals, maybe the Mile High before in 2008, and the election scenario was obviously Hillary's gonna win the presidency in the status quo. She'll be elected president. We all know this. Plan makes her not win, which is bad. And of course, the MG response was, no, Rudy Giuliani's gonna win the presidential election in the status quo, and Plan makes Hillary win, right? Which is just an example of even a year or something in advance, we just make fucking terrible predictions in debates, and we shouldn't. Okay. Sorry for swearing. My bad. Okay. So I think another thing that needs to be happening is general argument comparisons. It's incredibly important to compare arguments. All of you, start doing this. And those of you who are kind of I do that, do it more. It's not enough. Not enough people do enough comparison. The easiest thing to do in the world is drops versus mitigation, comparative amounts of ink. It's easy to compare. It's there's 6 answers to this F, there's 2 answers to the F, so F's better. It's fine, but you should be comparing the specific arguments at a bit of a more nuanced level than that, right? I think one of the coolest things to do is talk about relative responsiveness. And this goes back to the go-around method of debating. I think good PMRs are really great at saying, you say this, that doesn't answer this argument, right? That is not a response to this argument. Quality of the evidence is like kind of a thing that's a little bit hard to do in parley, but sometimes you can, don't sound, I don't know, it's a tough line to walk because you don't want to be like, but our source is so good. But there's room to do a little bit of that if you actually have particularly good warrants for yourself, or just, they just sort of claim something versus we have, a general who said, yes, this is how our military evaluates these decisions. I think specificity and context are really good. I think people tend to make like really broad claims, like, oh, this is an example. It's an example that makes fun of my team, which is great. So, what was it? It was like the China disad, which of course Whitman read a million times. There was a link argument that said something like, if the United States interferes in Chinese sphere of influence, like China will pound its fist on the table so loud the world can hear it. It was from, I don't know, like a deputy minister or someone in the Chinese government, I think is where this source is from. And like, that argument was labeled U.S.-Chinese relations are zero-sum. It does not say that. It does not mean that. Like, it is just like an inflammatory statement that is then attributed to mean this incredibly important thing of relations are zero-sum. That does not prove that the United States is not able to coexist alongside China peacefully in Africa. That does not prove that United States development is always a threat to China, right? Like, so, look at the claims people are making, like, do you actually prove the thing you're saying? No. Instead, prove specific empirics, for example, about areas in which we do work alongside Chinese development and everything's kosher. I think concreteness and real-world examples are good. I think that, I don't know, the thing that I think is a really great tool whenever people can do it is examples from history are great, but whatever. Here's another thing kind of for PMRs generally is, maybe this goes here, maybe it doesn't, but find missing components in their argument. When we talked about all the components that are necessary to win something, you should always be on the lookout for arguments that are missing something, which I think I'm going to talk about in a second. So here's a very quick concept. Is the idea of narratives in the PMR, obviously not like, the idea of narratives, good arguments in debate, that can be part of their, whatever. So I think sometimes it's really important, in addition to telling the story about the round, and this happens more and more in bigger debates, right, as you start, but this is advanced, so we can talk about that. As you start getting into like the last couple debates of the tournament, I think it's important to tell a story about how the debaters performed and what happened so that you won, and not like the affirmative in a broad sense, but so that you and your partner won. And I think that like telling those stories makes a lot of sense because I think judges like to latch onto those. And you will often hear debaters tell these stories and judges repeat those justifications after the round, right? It's particularly true, I think, if you're considered not as good, because I think like a thing that happens is judges are like, wait, you voted for this team? And it's like, no, I'm going to help you out. Here's why you get to say that you voted for us, even though you don't think we're smart. Or whatever, right? Judges think you're smart, but whatever. I think you understand what I'm saying. So, the opponent fell into a trap. They were prepared to answer a different critique of ours, and they read the wrong answers. It's like a really good story to be able to tell if it's true. We are inclusive of these arguments. They spread themselves out of the round because they want to read this one argument, something like that. The best example of that I ever saw was actually in the LOR, but it was the same thing. It was in Nationals in 2010. When Texas Tech won, and Brian Horton and Adam read like a tricot procedural in the LOC. The MG spent like 3 minutes on it. And the LOR overview is like something, we were never going for tricot in the final round of Nationals. You got played, son. And like the entire debate was over at that point. Like everyone was just, it was like completely over. It was super effective. Don't let that kind of swagger stuff be a substitute for substance, but it's nice to have. Okay, so for PMR order, I'm going to be really quick with this because I want to take some questions. Begin with the easiest arguments in the path of least resistance, right? And even if it's stuff that doesn't matter as much, just start with something easy. You start establishing a rhythm, which is really important in debates. Like, you know how it feels when you are rifling through arguments. You're just this, and you're rolling. You want to get rolling in every single PMR. You want to get the judge's head nodding, establish all of that awesome stuff. Then your opponent's best options are going on the bottom. It hopefully relegates them to an afterthought. It puts some tools in your hand to deal with those arguments, right? Like, when you come face to face with the disad that your partner, that damn MG, that they mostly conceded, you want to have your ass in hand to deal with that. I'll talk about that in just a second. So, framing and presentation. This stuff matters a lot. It's hard to explain. I think I'm glad that I focused more on what the process of the PMR looks like and what your goals are than this. This is probably a lecture unto itself. We can talk about it a little bit. I think this stuff is just always important. You should always be thinking about, how you're sitting, how you're carrying yourself, etc., what you're doing with your hands. Don't let it become weird. Control the way the judge evaluates the debate. So you need to be using phrases like, you need to evaluate this argument first, right? Like, the same judge could have the same flow, and depending on what they start and what they're looking for, come to different conclusions about debates. I think that that's very true. So you want to control that process as much as possible. So you need to evaluate this argument first because, or you will have to tell me how they got around this claim, I think is very powerful framing, right? Because I don't want to get yelled at, and don't be the person who yells at your judge. But it's like you can't explain how they win without explaining what you did with this argument is, I think, very effective framing. Or my favorite is look on the flow for when they say this, right? Or when they make this argument that they needed to make. Like, you will not find it. That's why they can't win. I think that stuff's really fun. I also really like asking rhetorical questions in the PMR. So let's say you're talking about some terrorist scenarios. When did the terrorists attack? Where did they strike? How do they get the nuke? How does the nuke get past customs? Like, are they able to use the nuke? Et cetera, right? And doing that allows you to kind of build. It sounds really rhetorically good, and it also does that. It also is a super sick way to just hide brand new arguments. I am really not a fan of new arguments in the PMR. I really do think that you should be going through your MG's arguments, and that's the only way you're going to win. But when you need a little bit of extra sauce to kind of get you through the debate, like rhetorically questioning things or pointing to the absence of good arguments from your opponent is like a really good way to be like, also this is kind of new link defense in the last 30 seconds of the round. Don't worry about it. I think changing pace is really important in the PMR. If you watch SIU debaters in the PMR, they're pretty extreme with it. They coach the SSSG, which is the stop, slow, stop, go thing. I did that a lot more when I was being coached by Brandon than I would have done my senior year. None of this is interesting to you, but that's the idea of I'm going to talk and build my PMR rhythm, then I'm going to stop. I'm not going to look up. I'm going to tell you a story, right? I think that is a fine way to do it. I think that you can also do it less dramatically than that. But the biggest way to get people engaged and listening is really important. Don't let people autoflow you in the PMR. They have to listen, is to vary your pace at times. Let's skip that. Wow, this stuff is long. Okay, well, this will all go on the Dropbox if I don't get through everything. So handling points of order, there's the old expression, if you're not treating, you're not trying. Wrong, exclamation mark, says Joe's snide PowerPoint. I think it generally kills your credibility. Most judges aren't going to grant you those new arguments. You don't have time to develop new arguments sufficiently anyway. I think you really can't succeed in PMR unless your strategy is predicated on the MG. We talked about kind of some ways to be sneaky, but for the most part, you got to go with what your MG gave you. Never just concede that an argument is new, even if it is, right? Like, never just go, you got me. There's like a really I've heard a story of someone debating as a young person and being point of order going, well, I had to try, as their response. Not a great response to the point of order. So this is all a perception thing, right? Like, I don't think that the judge is actually deciding, except for the rarest of cases, whether an argument's new or not based on the point of order. So your response doesn't matter as much as just like sounding clutch on it and not letting it throw you off. So I think repeating the exact MG framing is awesome, which means listening very closely to the MG and trying, work on your memory as a debater. There's located in the MG. This is another thing that I would do. I was usually telling the truth when I did this, but I would always say what number the MG argument was, even if I didn't have it numbered, right? Because that makes it sound like I know exactly where it is. So I knew that, if I know that Emily made some argument somewhere on the link page, I'd be like, oh, this is literally the MG number 7, like even if I have no idea whether or not it was the 7th argument she made. I wouldn't do that too much. Because some judges are numbering well, but it's that type of thing that I think is good. I think there are phrases that you can lean on. This is an explanation of the importance of the MG argument, not a new argument. Or this is an answer to X from the block. Or I'm comparing the strength of the MG claim and the answer. This is exactly what the PMR is for. That type of stuff. Also, never call more than 2 points of order when you're neg. You just are annoying judges. And making yourself look like either you're obviously winning and you're being a jerk, or you're losing and you're afraid that you're losing. Okay, really quick, prep for the PMR. So a good PMR starts perhaps in prep, perhaps right this moment, because you always have time to be getting better at debate. So you should be thinking, just in your free time, as much as possible. Get obsessive about it. Live a healthy life, but also don't. You should be thinking at each level of each argument, what arguments you want to extend, how you want to extend those arguments. That's happening in prep. You should also be thinking, like, in your everyday life, like, how do I want to sound when I'm giving this, when I'm going for reasonability of the PMR on T? What do I want that to sound like? And then just come up with that framing. Or how do I want to present we solve warming or something like that? You should also be thinking about PMR framing against likely scenarios. Like how, if you know what offenses, if you know they're going to have good case answers, think about what try or die sounds like. You need to be active during the neg speeches. During the LOC the block, think about holes in their arguments. What arguments threaten you? Make visible, make visible notations. Constantly ask yourself, like, can I go for X? Okay, it's been another 30 seconds. Could I still go for it? Always be doing that. 1 second. Also be active during the MG. I want to hear any of you PMRs out there complaining about how you lost a round because your MGs screwed you over. You give every speech as a team. And, like, I don't know what people are thinking is happening in these scenarios. Like, they're telling a story about how their MG, like, said nothing. And apparently they're just sitting there going, like, this is dumb. Like, okay, get in, like, help your partner. Like, why are you sitting there watching them make bad arguments, apparently? Don't go too far. Work something out with your partner. Like, it's their speech. But you need to know what arguments you need, be willing to prompt them, know what's sufficient, move your partner on. For the block, be thinking really hard. The LOR is prep time. Don't listen to LORs. That's for chumps. Have your partner listen and tell you if anything super important is happening and tell them you about impact calc. Okay, let's do questions because there's not much time, if any. Sorry, Justin, you had a question a second ago?
Yes. Because you obviously you're PMR, so would you ever take your MG flow up there? You're listening.
Yeah, man.
MG to.
Yeah. Sometimes my MG was like really awesome and was a really technical debater, and I wasn't. So sometimes I would know if things were going a little bit downhill. I'm like, Emily, I need these flows. Like, you need to give me all of your flows right now. Yeah, I think that can be helpful. Your MG is also a resource to you, right? Like, especially, like, most of you are debating with smart people that you like a whole lot. I'm sorry if that's not the case. That's tough. You should be like you should always be like, hey, this is the PMR strategy I have in mind. What's your reaction? And like the thing that I love that was so great about debating with, and I had other awesome partners. I'm mainly talking about Emily, but a great thing about all my partners is they're a great resource because prep is hard for PMR. You should be very active in prepping. Like before you get up there, you should know what your answers are, kind of to everything. You need to get that all figured out. Otherwise, like you're going to be like, what is the answer to this link turn? Like in the middle of your PMR, that's tough. So prep as much as possible. So like if I knew something was going to give me trouble, I'm like, Emily, I need to look for arguments that answer this disad link. And I would go about prepping something else, and then she'd give me like 3 arguments. I think that using your partner that way is really effective. Other questions? Let's try to get some in. I'm sorry I didn't leave you all more time. No? No one's got any? All right, y'all can, Allison.
Thoughts on the lengthening overview?
Yeah, I think that varies a lot. This is another thing that I got into arguments with Martin about. My personal philosophy is that, like, if you're doing an overview that's more than, like, 10 to 15 seconds, you're just doing line by line that you're going to repeat later. So I think that, for me, the point of an overview was very much like the idea of, I'm going to just tell you what my thesis is. Maybe one joke goes here, maybe not. Don't make jokes if it's not your thing. Make jokes if it is, but focus on substance. Anyway, overview is going to be like a couple sentences tops. It's going to explain to you my context for the round, and then when I start doing the line by line, that will just inform you of the direction that I'm going. I think that's the most valuable thing you can establish in an overview. I think a lot of other overviews tend to just be super repetitive if they're not more focused than that. I think the other big thing you can do in an overview is some impact calc stuff, which is fine, and then maybe you get up to like a 30-second or so overview. But I just like that later anyways. I like impact calc once the impacts are done.
So say your framework has set you up for your PMR. Could you talk about at that point, cross-applied my arguments that I brought my framework that were dropped, so you're going to be looking at systemic order hypo, and let's get into how these systemic impacts.
Yeah, sure. You should go to framework, and then always be more specific with our extensions, right? So go to the 4th argument on framework. It says prefer systemic impacts because X. That means that the only impacts you're going to be looking at are the systemic ones which are happening on the affirmative. Go to my systemic impacts now. Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
So I was literally just in Brendan's lecture, and he said that another really good thing to put in your impact calculus is reversibility and specificity.
Those are great too.
So not just magnitude, probability.
Yeah. No, those were kind of the three big ones. There's a lot of reasons to prefer one impact versus another. Those were kind of some of the biggest ones, but certainly I'm not trying to sleep on reversibility.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah. No, those are good
Everyone's
things.
in agreement. So
Yeah.
those are good things.
And I don't know, it's good when there's disagreements too, because you get different flavors. But I don't think that's a particular thing. I disagree with what you're about.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for listening, y'all.